That morning, I didn't walk into the store as a CEO. I walked in as just another man. Jeans, old hoodie, ball cap pulled low. No one recognized me. They weren't supposed to, but what I heard as I stepped inside stopped me cold. Someone was crying, soft, muffled, behind the stockroom door. It wasn't anger. It was exhaustion, the kind that comes after years of being unseen. When I peeked around the corner, I saw a man in a janitor's uniform, on his knees, clutching a letter in one hand and a cracked phone in the other. And right then, I knew something inside this company I built was broken. I started the company 15 years ago, with 2 employees, 1 van, and a promise that no one would ever feel invisible working for me. Today, we had over 200 stores across the state. But success has a way of creating distance, layers of management, policies, middlemen. I'd been hearing quiet complaints online about poor conditions, pay issues, a toxic regional manager. No one had said it to my face. So I decided to go find out for myself. I walked through the aisles like any other customer, listening, watching. The shelves were clean. The staff looked tired, too quiet. Then came that sound and quiet sobs from the back. When I stepped closer, I recognized the janitor. Not his name, but his posture. The way he kept his shoulders tight like he was used to making himself small, he didn't see me. On the floor beside him lay a wrinkled pay stub and that letter. I couldn't read all of it, but I caught one line. Final warning, tardiness, policy violation, risk of termination. A clock on the wall showed 5:03 a.m. He'd probably been here all night. I wanted to speak, to ask what was wrong, but I stayed silent. You learn more when people think you're nobody. So I watched as he stood, wiped his eyes, and pushed his mop bucket down the hall. A quiet man in a world that had stopped noticing quiet men. And that's when I made a decision. I wasn't leaving until I knew what was really happening here. Over the next week, I came back every morning before sunrise. Same hoodie, same disguise. I learned his name from the schedule board, Derek. 6 years with the company. Never missed a shift. But the deeper I watched, the more the story unfolded, and the worse it got. I saw supervisors clocking out early while he stayed behind, cleaning up their mess. I heard one of them mock him for being too slow, though he was the only one doing the work. One morning, I watched him eat his lunch, half a sandwich, sitting by the dumpster, because the break room was for salaried staff only. Each moment built a picture I didn't want to believe. The problem wasn't just one cruel person. It was a culture that had forgotten its roots. Then one morning, I caught the regional manager talking to the assistant lead, laughing about how they'd been cutting unnecessary hours to meet quarterly targets. I heard my own company's name in that sentence, and my stomach dropped. I checked the posted schedules. Derek had lost 18 hours that week. His pay stub confirmed it. They'd moved him to part-time on paper, to dodge benefits. When I saw him limping one morning, I finally broke silence. I asked if he was okay. He said he'd twisted his ankle last week but couldn't afford to miss work. Then he smiled, that kind of weary smile people use when they've stopped expecting help. That night, I drove home furious. I pulled up the internal system on my laptop, logged in under a different admin account. I checked payroll records, employee reports, HR logs. What I found made my hands shake. Management had been reclassifying longtime employees as seasonal to save budget and deleting the records before they hit audit. It wasn't just Derek. It was dozens of others. I realized this wasn't mismanagement. It was a system built on quiet exploitation, and somehow I'd let it grow in my own house. Rehook, 5-min mark. But what I didn't know was that Derek had been documenting everything too. Every missing hour, every time card adjusted. He'd been saving it all, waiting for someone to care. I came in early that Friday with a plan. The regional manager, name was Keller, was holding a staff meeting that morning. I waited in the back of the room. Unnoticed, Keller started his usual speech about efficiency and accountability. Then he brought up Derek, calling him an example of underperformance. Laughter spread across the room. That was enough. I walked forward, took off my cap, and laid my company ID on the table. You could hear a pin drop. Keller's face turned white. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "Play the cameras." The assistant froze. Because I'd already reviewed the footage. Hours of it. The janitor staying late. Supervisors leaving early. Keller ordering timecard edits. I played one clip, then another. And finally, one where Keller said, "Corporate never checks these reports anyway." The silence after that was heavy. Keller tried to speak, but I stopped him. "You're right," I said. "Corporate didn't check." But I did. Security escorted him out. I looked around the room and faces pale, confused, ashamed. Then I called Derek in. He looked terrified, thought he was in trouble. I told him to sit. He laid his folder on the table. Inside, 6 months of notes, emails, photos. Everything I'd found, and more. He wasn't crying this time. He was shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was release. That folder became Exhibit A. By Monday, Keller was gone. So were 3 supervisors. But firing people wasn't enough. I reinstated every reclassified employee. Back pay, benefits, apologies in writing. I created a direct line for staff to reach corporate without fear. Derek refused a promotion at first, said he didn't want pity. I told him it wasn't pity. It was respect. He accepted. He became our new training lead, teaching managers what real leadership looked like. Weeks later, I returned to that same store. The air felt lighter. Music played quietly from the break room, and this time, Derek was sitting inside, eating lunch with the team. I stood by the door, unseen, and smiled. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from outrage. It comes from quiet people who refuse to stop caring, even when no one's watching. Final rehook. Reflection. I started this company to build something good. But somewhere along the way, I forgot. You can't build good things if you stop listening to the people holding the broom. The truth that day was worse than I imagined, but it also woke me up. So I'll leave you with this. If you run a company, a family, or even just your own life, ask yourself, who's cleaning up after the decisions you make? Because the answer to that question will tell you what kind of person you really are.